Okay, we'll get started. So, welcome everybody. So, my name is Evan Wong, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Checkbox. And today, I'm joined by my wonderful friend Caroline Ferguson for a fireside chat on the topic of why legal automation in a post-COVID world. And I'm kind of wishing that we were actually by a fireside right now because it's pretty cold where we are. Um, Caroline is the Business Transformation and Innovation Director at Simpson Grierson. She actually started her career as a finance lawyer, but because being a lawyer wasn't hard enough, she decided to transition her career into teaching lawyers how to innovate and use technology. And she did this at Allen and Overy in London for a few years and is now doing this, of course, at Simpson Grierson. Not only for the firm itself, but actually for her clients as well, her in-house legal teams. So Caroline is widely considered as an expert in this space and boasts a very impressive area of knowledge across process improvement, lean and agile, and change management, and all that good stuff that makes the modern day lawyer and the legal team successful. And it's all the rage right now that they're talking about. So I'm super, super excited to unravel some of that knowledge for us today. Welcome, Caroline.
Thank you. It's great to be here today.
Awesome. So I guess to start off, could you explain what the term legal transformation means to you and perhaps provide an example of a transformation project you've done with a client?
Sure. So for me personally at the moment, I kind of see it on a day-to-day basis, like informally, but also as a formalized concept as well. So from an informal basis, for me, legal transformation is just every day questioning what we do, why we do it, how we do it, could we do it better? Are there any opportunities to make a change that adds value? And it doesn't have to be a really sophisticated change. It can be a small change. So for me, it's just that mindset of always challenging what we do. And then from a formal perspective, kind of like what I run at Simpson Grierson, we have a formal legal transformation strategy. So that is based on what is strategically important for Simpson Grierson and our people and also our clients. So just a couple of examples that form part of our legal transformation strategy at the moment. We've got a big thing about kind of unleashing the capability of our people. So actually teaching our lawyers how to innovate. It kind of seems like this broad concept, but in actual fact, there is science behind it and there are best practice processes that you can bring to it. So we're doing our best to upskill our people and also sharing some of that with our clients. So that's one thing we're doing. And then obviously, this is a checkbox conversation. So emerging technology and using data and automation is also another stream of our strategy as well. So yeah, I see it as a day-to-day questioning what we do, how can we change it to add value, but equally formalizing it and having bigger goals and bigger programs as well.
And I love that because I think often when people think about legal transformation, they immediately associate with technology. And then as lawyers, it's kind of like, well, like I'm not a technologist, you know, and it kind of scares them. But actually, as you say, it's very much around just incremental improvement and just problem solving. And it's more of a mindset, isn't it, where you're able to look into, you know, your day-to-day and how do you improve the experience for the firm, for the lawyers, and for the clients, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be big, and it doesn't have to be scary. It can be small tweaks.
So I guess like, if we dive into that, like, how do you actually develop that sort of culture or that kind of mindset within your team? Because I can imagine, yep, it's easy to say that it's not about tech and it's about kind of the way we look at problems. But how do you develop that sort of culture then?
Yeah, if I'm completely honest, it takes a while. There's lots of research out there around lawyer personalities and being highly skeptical, which is obviously a challenge when you're doing innovation. Equally in saying that, I don't want to get tied up on that. And I kind of love the work out of IDEO and their concept of creative confidence, and that we actually all have it inherently in it. We just need to bring it out. So for me, one of the things that I really focus on is actually how do we create an environment where people are encouraged to identify improvements and kind of have a process for doing that. So just as an example, when we did the first cohort of our innovation program, they kind of went out there and scanned for opportunities and were just talking and just watching what people did and asking questions and doing little interviews. And so for those champions, that way of thinking is hopefully kind of now how they work. And it's just a mindset that they bring. So for me, it's just starting small with asking powerful questions and watching what we're doing and seeing what those opportunities are. But building a fully innovative culture takes years, and we're definitely still on our journey, but making some good steps. And one other thing I would add is having a process for doing it as well. So that also helps. If someone's got an idea, we can then work with them to say, right, this is the process that will work with you. We're going to set a mission. We're going to scan for opportunities. We're going to focus on the best opportunity, so that you know how to take things forward, and that you're not taking ideas forward for the sake of it. It's actually got some wheels behind it.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of that, because even outside of like legal transformation as a concept, but as a founder, I think a lot about culture all the time, and the best way, like one of the key ways of operationalizing culture, and it's the same way for legal transformation, is to have processes and rituals and routines around it. You need that so it feels more tangible, more real. So 100%. Okay, so the topic of today, though, is not just about legal transformation. It's specifically in the context of the world at the moment, of course, around the post-pandemic, or what we're still in, but the pandemic kind of COVID-19 world. So surely that's thrown a spanner in the works of even the conversations or the priorities. And I know that you recently conducted a survey. It was quite serendipitous, because I kind of thought that you'd be a great person to come on board and have a chat with. But then I also noticed you were running this survey at the time around transforming in-house legal teams and how they respond to COVID-19 and their future plans. So I believe the survey is now wrapped up. You had about almost 50 members from in-house teams participate. Want to dive into that? I think there's a lot of good insights in that. So I guess, what did you discover as being the key impacts of COVID-19 on the way that in-house legal teams operate today?
Sure. Well, I think the main theme that came through, which is not new for in-house teams, but is this whole more for less challenge, which was then just completely exacerbated by having COVID and new issues come up, and equally new issues while you're quickly adapting to new ways of working as well. So suddenly organizations overnight were working from home, you're adopting new tools to do that, but then equally you've got business stakeholders with contract issues or constructions going on that now can't be completed. So I think that the big theme was that more for less. Suddenly they had increased workloads. So 78% of our respondents had increased workloads. 30% of them then had decreased budgets, which creates a challenge as well. And so those are just two. When you've already got a really busy business as usual workflow, anything on top of that creates pressures. So I think that was one real challenge for in-house teams. But in saying that, what I found really positive from the survey was that 65% of teams are still sticking to their strategic priorities and are still looking at improvements they can make to help improve how they work. So I think COVID has definitely caused pressures, but there's still a commitment and a desire to keep moving forward as well.
And the more for less mantra, I guess, is not new to COVID. It's always been around. So it's just even more important now, isn't it? It's just pressures from both ends, as you say, more work and less budget or headcount to do it.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is why it's quite interesting, because it's almost like I've seen this trend recently where, because of COVID, we need to focus on stability and kind of BAU, but in the same way, that's not sustainable in the new world. So you're in this kind of tug of war between, like, we need to kind of invest in transformation and process improvement so that it can be sustainable, but at the same time, we're juggling the new norm. So it's quite interesting to see the industry at the moment.
Absolutely. Operating in that tension of, how do I spend time to save time? And I love the fact that you've used that word sustainability, because the reality is we just can't keep going how we're going. So there has to be some shift, but how do we do that in a way that you can get some quick wins, but keep the business as usual work going along as well?
Exactly. Yeah. And you mentioned strategic priorities, that 65% are sticking to that. So what are those, like, strategic priorities that they're looking at the moment?
The main areas that we were looking at were actually areas that we'd surveyed in 2018. So we wanted to see if the same strategic priorities were where people were spending their time. And so the main buckets for that were, of course, technology, but also strategic priorities around new resourcing models. So using contract lawyers, secondees, that kind of thing. Also new skill sets. Which is an area, to be honest, that I'm really passionate about, is, bringing new ways of working, whether that be design thinking or agile or project management principles into how you work to help enhance how you work. And then the other area is roles. We've obviously seen globally a massive shift to legal operations roles. In New Zealand, there's definitely a handful of roles that exist. Some are dedicated full-time, but most are lawyers who are trying to do legal ops on top of their day-to-day role, which is really challenging. It's still better than nothing, but really challenging. So those, yeah, in summary, those were the areas. So technology, roles, skill sets, and ways of working, resourcing.
Yeah, and the legal operations role, as you said, is going to become more and more important. You can have a dedicated role, as you were mentioning, but I've seen that the trend tends to be that it's kind of like a distributed side, like on top of my day job kind of thing for existing lawyers who have that kind of inclination towards it. I've even seen that role being taken up by the GC or the deputy GC, right? So what would be your advice around like the difference between, if you can't get the budget for, say, a dedicated legal ops role, how do you still push forward legal operation, initiatives, using your existing legal team or maybe the broader business? I don't know. What's been your experience?
I guess two of my main tips would be, yes, focus on people who've got that curiosity and that interest and who are keen on it as well. Because if they're trying to fit it on top of a day job, it's not something I think you can just delegate to someone who you think should do it. You want someone who wants to do it. I think the next aspect is really having strong leadership behind it. So if you are a GC and you want your team to be looking at things, make sure that you support and encourage and reward them for doing that. And if you can, create some space to do that and some time to do that. And I know that that can be challenging, but even setting aside 90-minute workshops for your team, just to help that person get face time with your team to explore options, is really important. So yeah, finding the right curious, interested person and then having leadership to back it, to keep the momentum up, to keep supporting it, to help the team set goals that you can then check in on and see what progress you're making, would be my other tips as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the top-down kind of support is really important. But let's say the whole concept, and it's particularly during, again, in the context of the pandemic now, how do people who are evangelists and understand the benefits of legal operations, I guess, build the business case and convince senior stakeholders or the business broadly to invest in legal operations and legal transformation broadly? Because I can imagine, like, I'm a big fan of all of this, and I'm, you're preaching to the converted here, but how do you get the business case or the budget or the resource or just the focus or the strategic alignment for effectively, everything we're talking about on this chat?
There are so many parts that come together to doing a proper business case, and I have to admit, in the 10 years that I've been in not practicing as a lawyer but in an innovation role, I've definitely felt the challenges sometime of getting more senior stakeholders to buy into what you want to do. So I guess some of my personal tips that I've found really helpful is making sure that there is actually a problem to start with. Start with a problem, start with a pain point, and fully get a picture of what that looks like as well. So get the data behind it that shows that it's a challenge. So whether that's, the numbers around really high volume areas of work, have the numbers. If it's taking too long, have the data around what the average time for those matters could be and why potentially there's needs to be new resource or a new way of doing it to reduce those times. And then obviously, what are the benefits for your end users as well? So really looking at what your legal team's role is within the business and showing that by doing this, you will be adding more value to the business so that they can see why they need to do it, and potentially put some urgency behind it as well. So yeah, problem and data are really, really important for building a business case.
Yeah, agreed. If I add to that, what you mentioned around the end users is really interesting, because what I often see is when lawyers look at transformation projects or look to design solutions, often, as you would kind of understand, they would think about the benefits for the legal team. And then they pitch it to the business or the senior stakeholders as, we need to invest in this because it's going to help the lawyers save X amount of time, or it's going to help us, help the legal team in X, Y, Z way. But it's actually a big part of kind of getting across the line is around the empathy for the end users. Yeah. How does this benefit the business? Is it around the quicker turnaround times for deal flow, because now we're not blocking you as a legal team? Is it that we can find documents faster for you, more accurate, all those kind of bits. So actually it's selling it not just for the legal team, but actually benefits as for the business stakeholders as well.
100%. And I've just this week been doing a number of project briefs, which of course includes a section of users. And it's amazing when you actually sit there and think about it and you discuss with your other team members, who are our users? You think there's going to be one or two, and you end up with kind of 8 or 9. Yeah. And I think you're right, it is a skill. And I have to admit that that's something that kind of design thinking has helped me with, like that focus on empathy and the end user. And also, getting beyond your team. And if I think of just, drafting documents and challenges around that, a legal team might just think, oh, I need to jump to a document automation system. But then in actual fact, even though the legal team may draft it, it might be another team then that manages that contract going forward. So, what you've suggested for automation, does that actually help with the management of that going forward? Are some of your end users not very sophisticated, legal, technical, skilled audience? So do you actually need to change that document as well to appeal to them? But it is initially quite easy to get stuck on, oh, this is what I need it to do. So really kind of opening your mind up and spending some time mapping your users, understanding their needs. Personas can be really helpful for doing that as well. So looking at tips and tricks for understanding your users can make a big difference and make you end up with a much better solution as well.
Totally. Yeah, it's like, if that document automation example you gave, it's like if lawyers were previously drafting the document, just by shifting the exact same process through technology to the business, that's not going to work, because now, because you're just taking a lawyer thinking process and putting on the business, and you're not thinking about the fact that this is a new user now. We're not using the same legalese, the same sort of, the thinking that a lawyer is trained to have. And you almost need to redesign the way the underlying process is done, because the delivery mechanism is now different.
Absolutely. And kind of slightly going off on a tangent, but that's one area that I really loved seeing, is that whole idea of making contracts more simple, more usable, looking at design, looking at layout. Can you incorporate visuals? I just think that is such a brilliant movement in terms of kind of access to justice, as well as just kind of enjoying being involved in the legal process, rather than just being kind of hit with a wall of paper.
Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of that as well. We need to have another chat outside of this about contract design, and big fan of that as well. Cool. And I guess last thing I'll say to that point, actually around buy-in, is I think one thing that I've found as well that works really well is, how do you align, I guess, your legal transformation initiatives with the broader business strategy, right? So you mentioned kind of the very quantitative metrics, and we talked about kind of the benefits for the business and not just for the legal team. But what I found as well is, if you can manage to align yourself with the broader business strategy, like the organizational strategy, then it builds a very strong case when you take it up whether that's, cost cutting or efficiency or simplification of processes. If legal can show that they are contributing to a broader, company goal, I've also found that to be quite successful as well.
100%, and that's actually something that I've learned as well, is when I set my strategy, I actually put for each of our pillars, I put in how that relates to the firm's higher level strategy as well. So it just makes it much easier in the conversation. We want to do this because this is an example of this aim or this objective. So that definitely makes a difference.
Awesome. Okay, so we've already talked, I guess, a bit about the challenges like budget and business case, but are there any other challenges that you've come across from your survey or from your experience in, I guess, pursuing legal transformation at the moment in I guess, this environment?
Sure. The leading challenge was actually lack of time, which actually links into kind of everything we've discussed. So that was 69% of our respondents said their biggest challenge for transformation activity was lack of time. The other ones that did come up in addition to budget were things like integrating with existing systems, which is definitely something that I know that a number of our clients battle with on a day-to-day basis. Also a little bit of resistance to change, but I'm hoping that is changing. And sometimes it is a cultural piece as well and keeping momentum. But yeah, lack of time, budget, and integrating with systems were some of the leading ones.
Gotcha. And what have you seen work in I guess, overcoming those later challenges that you just mentioned?
Definitely having people dedicated to legal ops, like we've talked about before. And the other area that we touch on in our survey findings is the power of incorporating things like Agile and design thinking into how legal teams work to help deal with some of those challenges. Just a couple of really simple examples that lots of legal teams for a number of years around the globe have been doing, kind of using Kanban boards. So whether that be a physical one or an online one, like a Trello, but having all of the work that they've got on, where the status of it is, having that as a way of managing priorities, but equally a way to kind of manage your relationships with other business units and your customers internally. So if they've got a new piece of work, they can either come and physically see your board, probably not as much now as we used to, but you can show them, your Trello board and say, look, this is what we've got on, this is what we're prioritizing for the business this week, but we can fit you in here. But it just makes the conversation a bit easier. So that's just one small example of how Agile can help your team stay on top of what you've got on, help you prioritize, and it can be really low tech if it needs to be, but it can certainly help the team with some of those challenges around lack of time, lack of budget, being able to do something simple, but that can actually make a big difference if you commit to giving it a go and iterating to find a process that works for you.
And how do people get started? Like, let's say they're very early on in their journey. And I think what's interesting as well, I keep reading reports and I keep hearing in speaking circuits that I think there is a lot more in-house teams that are early on in their journey than further down the track. And it's funny because I feel like there may be this kind of unspoken embarrassment of being so early on, but actually everyone's pretty much at the beginning. And that's just not in any particular jurisdiction. It's quite a broad trend globally. So with that in mind, like how do people who are just starting the journey get into like design thinking and understanding like Agile methodology, to even maybe they're Googling Kanban at the moment as we talk, but like how do they then just drop into that kind of knowledge, like pool of knowledge coming from, I guess, traditionally legal training?
Yeah, a couple of answers to that. Firstly, on the design thinking and specifically legal design, I highly recommend checking out the D School out of Stanford and the work of Margaret Hagen. It's just really good because it's kind of legal specific, starting to apply those principles as well. And there's definitely, if you kind of search legal design, there's various courses you can do as well. The other really good one to look at is Wavelength in the UK have done some really good blogs on legal design as well. So that might be something to check out as well. But your other question about kind of how else can you get going? The other thing that I'm really loving is kind of seeing collaboration from tech vendors with potential in-house clients, but also in-house teams and law firms. So I think if you've got a question, go and ask one of your suppliers. Lots of law firms are kind of like us. We're already on our journey with this. We're always really keen to learn what we're learning, both what works and what doesn't. So if we can save pain for other people, we will, and be honest about some of what works and what doesn't. So yeah, another way to start is to ask suppliers that you're working with, because I am sure they will be keen to chat. And if they can't help, they will certainly put you in the direction of someone who can. There's equally really brilliant networks on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. I find Twitter really helpful just from a legal design, legal transformation perspective. So jump on there, put in the hashtag and see what you come up with. I'm sure you'll come across some really good conferences and therefore the summary papers from it, people to follow, other kind of white papers or reports or webinars. So that's another avenue to check out.
Yeah, I love that answer. It's not only broad, but like I truly believe in the kind of, the partnership, the knowledge partnership model. Like there is so much knowledge and like, even on the point of, like Agile and all those things, like that has come out of, say, software, right? Like, I mean, we live and breathe and our whole business as vendors are built on that. So if we can embed some of that DNA within our clients, I mean, that's bread and butter for us, right? And with law firms, I mean, law firms have been on this journey of transformation for many, many years now. They've been burnt and you've learned from your lessons, and, there's so much knowledge there. And I think conversations just with, I guess your circle of partners is such an effective way. So yeah, I definitely am a big fan of encouraging anyone in the industry, just to have those conversations. People are willing to help, like you and I, very willing to help and share knowledge.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm saying this to everyone that I meet at the moment, but I'm reading a really brilliant book at the moment called Rebel Ideas, and it's all about the fact that innovation needs diversity, and it talks about kind of collective wisdom, and the fact that the best ideas and the best innovations come from putting things together. And so it talks about the importance of networking and socializing, not in the kind of like boring go to drinks and have polite conversation, but actually asking questions of the people that you're engaging with regularly, that you're working with or getting technology from or getting legal services from. So yes, ask questions. Also, I know that in-house teams, their wider organization might already be going on an agile or a design thinking journey. So there's probably other parts of organizations that are willing to help as well.
Awesome. All right, we're getting close to time. It's been a fantastic conversation. If people wanted to find out more about, I guess, the report findings and generally the conversation that we've been talking about, is there a way for them to get the report, get in contact with you?
Absolutely. So we'll be releasing the report more widely next week. But in the meantime, feel free to look up Simpson Grierson, search for me, find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to be contacted and connect with others, and would love to share our findings directly with you and have a chat about that. So please be sure to get in touch via the website or via LinkedIn.
Awesome. It's been fantastic, Caroline. Always love chatting with you. And for everyone that tuned in for today or watching the recording, thanks for your time for listening as well. And we'll catch you at the next one. Thanks, Caroline.
Great. Thanks for having me.